Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In his name I begin, and peace and blessings be upon Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. We'd like to send our condolences to the Imam of our time for the death of the Queen, the philanthropist, our mother, Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam. And may Allah shower His blessings upon all of you during this holy month of Shahr Ramadan. I'm Berak Hussain, registered psychotherapist, the Muslim counselor, and on behalf of the Islamic Shia Ithna Ashari Association of Edmonton, would like to welcome you once again to The Mindful Muslim, an online series with monthly episodes exploring mind-provoking discussions with special guests on topics relevant to you. We'll be looking at all sorts of topics, discussing social, psychological, cultural, mental health, religious, familial, and of course, current matters. Our episode today will be exploring spirituality and religion's impact on our well-being and our mental health. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, for indeed with every hardship, there is relief. Indeed, with every hardship, there is relief. Modern psychological research shows that religion and spirituality have a significantly positive impact on our mental health and can play an important role in our lives. In fact, in times of crisis, many will turn to trusted religious leaders in their communities before they turn to medical and mental health professionals. Our beliefs can also have a profound influence on mental health and well-being. When the statistics show that US Muslims are 2 times more likely to attempt suicide compared with other religious groups, according to a study published July 2021 in the Journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatry. And nearly 8% of Muslims in the survey reported a suicidal attempt in their lifetime, compared with the 6% of Catholics, 5% of Protestants, and 3.6% of their Jewish respondents. This shows us that indeed we need to have an in-depth discussion around this topic. And joining us today to explore this relevant and valuable topic is Syed Asad Jafri, an honor to have him with us today. And he was born and raised in Toronto, Canada, a fellow Canadian. And after completing his bachelor's in the IT field, he pursued his Hausa studies in Qom in 2004, earning a second bachelor's degree in the field of Quranic sciences. He is currently pursuing his master's degree in Islamic theology, and he resides in Toronto, where he serves the greater Islamic community. He's a global lecturer and speaker and one of the advocates of mental health in Islam in our communities. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid. Azam Allah ajurakum, and blessings to you for this holy month of Ramadan. Thank you for joining us today.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much for having me. And also let me offer all of you as well my condolences, and the Imam, of course, on this wafat and the death anniversary of Bibi Khadija salamullah alayha. And perhaps it's fitting that during her death anniversary, we're talking about the idea of giving and the idea of sacrifice and the idea of completely buying into a system that her husband, of course, the Holy Prophet, had given into. So thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. It's always a pleasure to share the panel once again with you on this topic, sister.
God bless you, Syed. An honor as always. We've been working throughout the years, whether in person or virtually. I look forward to working with you in person again and exploring this topic in so much more depth. And as you said, very relevant to Sayyidah Khadija salamullah alayha, who I think is an incredible role model, not just for women, but for everybody, and how she was the mother and took care of early Islam, and how we can learn from her today. And linking this to our topic today, and we're going to try to stick to the time because we both are very passionate about this topic, inshallah. So when we take a look at this discussion, I wanted to start off by asking you, in your opinion and your experience and your knowledge, is psychology, you could say modern psychology, even Islamic psychology in general, and mental health, is it compatible with the Islamic way of life?
It's such a beautiful question, and I think that what has come out of this discussion in the past decade, I would say, and when you have people like yourself and others who are working tirelessly, I mean, the amount of programs I see you do on this topic, I think you really are opening up, an entire dimension of the deen that was already there, mind you. It was just a little bit closed for everybody else, and that is the fact that Islam, from day number one, has talked about the idea that the insan, the human being, is mind, is body, and is soul. And with every act of worship, even if you were to look at the deen through strictly a fiqhi lens, And a lot of us are a little bit guilty of that, that we think a successful Muslim is the one who just simply keeps up with their prayer and their fast. And there's no doubt there's one dimension of that is true, but there's an entire elevation now to be had. But even if we look at that basic level of just doing what is asked for you to do, even in every act of worship, there is a mindful presence, there is a presence of the physical body, and of course, a spiritual presence as well. And I think that anyone who attempts to separate that, and we're kind of hearing a little bit of that nowadays, where people think, it doesn't matter how I look on the outside or what I do on the outside, as long as I'm spiritual on the inside, right? So this whole SBNR movement, spiritual but not religious, the idea that I believe in a higher power, but I don't really sort of, follow an organized religion. So dressing modestly, for example, praying, for example, those things are all on my account, or I call the shots, right? Where in reality, the idea is that if you are going to now submit to a higher power, then that higher power dictates to you what's good for your body, what's good for your mind, and what's good for your soul. So, for example, in the month of Ramadan, it's a prime example. This is that month where there is this boost from day number one of spirituality. The body, of course, goes through a very rigorous training exercise across 30 days. And we are always mindful of what we are doing. The slightest little bit of, let's say, for example, those who cook iftar, or they have to taste a little bit, they're very mindful of it. We get questions like, oh, I did this by mistake, is my fast broken? It might be the only act of worship amongst the furu where we are constantly in tune with the fiqh. We're so worried about, will this break my fast? Will that break my fast? And the point is that when you have that presence of the mind now, right, that's essentially what psychology is all about, is that your entire existence now moves towards a certain purpose. Now, I'm not an expert, sister, you are, so I don't want to step on your toes. I don't want to pretend like I'm someone I'm not.
Please, astaghfirullah. What you have to say is incredibly important and valuable.
Yeah, no,
really.
But I do, I have begun to understand that there is this immense amount of emphasis on niyyah inside of the deen. And I think, there are some people who always ask, what's my niyat? What's my niyat? What's my intention here? How do I? And Islam has said that, look, your whole a'mal is based on your intention. Which means what? That you have to be mindful and present inside of that act of worship.
Exactly.
And when you are absent-minded, then it's just muscle memory, right? And you might have, sort of checkmarked the salat, but really, truly, it hasn't gained that traction that it's supposed to gain. So I realize now that these things they all happened 1,400 years ago. It's nothing new. Now the West is talking about mindfulness and being present and being this and that. The Deen talked about that, thousands of years ago, right? So I think there absolutely is a link. The Deen is not just fiqh. The Deen is psychology. The Deen is the idea of philosophy. The Deen is all these things. So, there is a link for sure, no doubt.
Absolutely. And the research has shown that now in a more, let's say, practical, pragmatic way, where we can see it in numbers, and it proves what we've known all along. Like you said, perhaps people were not aware of how much it has been there. And then when we look at it from this perspective, because in our communities, the stereotypes and the misconceptions and the taboo is that, if you go see a mental health professional, they're going to take you away from religion. They're not going to understand our concepts. They're going to get you to rebel against your parents or culture and religion. And I think these are misconceptions, especially if you can go to somebody who, even though they're not of the same faith, there's somebody who's been trained in cultural counseling and are aware of that, right? But there's always that beauty in growing up. I always, what struck out in my mind when I was younger is the beautiful image of the Prophet, how he would mindfully eat his food. I remember hearing that in lectures, reading about it. And that struck me as a young psych student. Oh, look at how he pays attention to how he's eating, the taste, and in quiet silence. Like you said, Syed, now this is something that just now people are on this new wave of, just spiritual, secular type of psychology and spirituality that's nothing to do with God. Meanwhile, our faith has put that in place day one, 1,400 years ago, and it's something to be proud of. And I remember as a young psych student, it was quite exciting to kind of think about merging it together and seeing the whole picture. But there was nothing back then in terms of research, in terms of journals,
and there wasn't. You're right, and that's why a lot of people thought that the Deen didn't have a solution for me.
Exactly.
So it took years. It's still taking years for us to kind of break that stigma. That's why they're really rushing towards a secular Western mode of knowledge and solution, because they believe that, okay, you know what, they have a comprehensive discussion on this topic. Lo and behold, we have very clear verse of the Quran that talk about the idea that everything is about being hadir and present in what you're doing. Yeah. So,
Absolutely, being
yeah.
present, and in terms of prevention is the cure, and propagating goodness. You will find it. These are beautiful prophetic traditions that, if you look
Absolutely.
at it from a Western psychological
Yeah.
perspective, this is positive psychology, right? Mind
Yeah.
over body, what you put out
Yeah.
there, and how you can propagate that
Yeah.
energy and goodness
It
into.
must it must be pretty exciting for someone like you to kind of see both sides of it. I mean, you know, like, you know, to say, wait a second, that there's a whole hadith on this inside the Western textbook. I mean, it's pretty mind blowing, no?
It is
Yeah,
exciting, and like I
yeah.
said, as a young psych student, where I actually did my master's and graduate studies on Islamic counseling theories and
That's
practice
amazing.
into a
Yeah.
clinic, or into a practice, into a community, and at that time, it was like pulling, what's the expression? Pulling, teeth to trying to
Teeth.
find
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
and it was mostly me having discussions
right.
with sheikhs and alimas and scholars, and the loosely translated books that we had about the nafs, about the self, which was fascinating, because I found a strong link with Western psychology when it talks about the different parts of the self. Although, you know, we're talking about Freud here, who talked about the id, the superego, and so on, which is very similar to what we have in the Holy Quran about
Yes,
nafs al-mutma'inna, nafs
yes,
al-ammara, and it's
yes.
so beautiful to have seen that. And so I found a few articles back then that weren't really, you know, big back then, but then over the last 15 years, mashallah, we see this plethora of
Yeah,
growth of people
yeah,
and young people just so
yeah.
interested in studying and seeing the link. Do you know how many emails and contacts I get of people who are saying, "Can you first supervise us?
Oh, I could
Second,
imagine. I could imagine.
yeah,
And it's
can you
amazing.
guide us with
And
the
the thing is that
study?"
when you have people like yourself and others who are paving the way, I mean, really, you know,
Inshallah.
it's quite incredible how those people now, you know, who are in the field. I don't know if their intention was ever to give back to the community, but now that they're entrenched in that, you know, in the psych field, now they want to give back, right? So we live in a
Absolutely.
an abundance of riches era where we have a lot of these, like yourself again, and many like you, who have that Dean worldview. At the same time, you have that Western education as well. So, you know, I think that it's a jewel and a gem and a blessing that I think we take for granted sometimes. No doubt.
Alhamdulillah wa shukr.
Yeah,
It's very exciting to see where it's
yeah,
heading, and
yeah.
especially because now, let's say, big organizations like the Imam Mehdi Association of
Mm,
Marja'iyya, which
mhm.
I'm working with them on a project that they've sought out
Yes, yes.
certain professionals to work on a new
Mm,
program. So I got to do a plug-in here. It's called
mm,
Psyched for You, and we've got this
yes.
amazing survey out looking at what the needs are in here in North America for the families and communities, and the scholars and the mental health professionals. We're all working together to provide, in terms of education, psychoeducation, psycho-Islamic education, videos and resources, but also taking information so we know what the needs are in the community, especially when you heard here, when we first started the program, the high rates of suicide, where Muslims are more likely. And
Mm.
that's really frightening and
It's
scary.
frightening. It is very scary. Yes,
And
yes.
we've had some really public suicides in
Mm,
our community,
mm,
families that we know,
mm,
of prominent religious scholars, and who've
mm,
been public about that as well.
mm.
And it's really important then, you know, to explore this next question when it comes to that. Although you and I don't believe that, but it's important to look at it. You know, can spirituality and religion be harmful for
Mm.
someone who is living with a mental illness? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, obviously, you know, call me biased. I don't know how people navigate through their mental health without spirituality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you know, you talked about the nafs mutma'inna. You talked about the idea that, you know, like salat alone, and you touched on that in conferences as well. You know, if we can just explore salat itself and open this beautiful act of worship up, there's a reason why God makes it a pillar of our fiqh, and why it's 5 times a day, and why it's so, you know, purposely drawn out, that, you know, before you start your day, in the middle of the day, in the evening. You know,
absolutely.
these are things that are escapes from the madness of the world, right? You go to the musalla for 5 minutes now, reset yourself with Allah, reset your purpose, and go back out in the dunya. And, you know, it's just, to me, I mean, I oftentimes say people who are grieving, people who are going through a lot of issues, and yeah, they do call me, even though I'm not an expert in this field. I'm probably the first step to kind
Yeah.
of get their sort of grief out, and I'm just an ear to them, and then I pass them on to people like yourself and others. But I, you know, initially, the lens is always, God. And that's the hope I see, is that they're starting to believe in this thing called Islam, right? They're starting to think that maybe me coming to the mosque will help me. Maybe a verse or two of the Quran might be a little bit helpful. Maybe all those things I heard at Sunday school might actually work, right? And so,
Exactly.
I think that people are now kind of jumping on board. We're not there yet, if you ask me. But, alhamdulillah, I think that, we have to keep chipping away and present the deen not to be a robotic religion that's just based on rules and regulations, but an actual path of healing, and a path of salvation, and a path of comfort for those who are struggling, right? For sure.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to add to that, Sayyidina, in
Please.
terms of, we believe that. You and I 100% believe that. So when we have a scenario, and I'll give you a real life example of a student years ago. I work in a university medical clinic where we have the psychotherapeutic services. So you get these students who are overwhelmed with academics and just life in general, the different challenges, family pressures, expectations, just hating on themselves as well, feeling they're not good enough, imposter syndrome, et cetera, et cetera. And then you add faith. So some of them are Muslim students. So I had this one student a few years ago where I saw, excuse me, this, how faith initially on the outskirts could look harmful. And I'll explain why. I'll explain why, because this is really important. And this is where a lot of, let's say, misconceptions come from people, where they run away from religion when it comes to mental health, and because of how people respond to people with mental health issues. So this student comes in, and I knew he was Muslim. He knew I was Muslim. Of course, you should see how students respond. Muslim students, when they see me come out to get them in the waiting room, they see a muhajjaba, their faces, they freak out, drops, because they're like, oh my God, she's going to know all the haram I've committed,
Oh, no, yes.
looks on their faces. So when they come in, obviously that's not the first thing we're going to talk about. I don't even acknowledge unless they say salam. I reply back, which is nice. Some non-Muslims sometimes say salam. So
Very nice.
it's beautiful. So they come in, we talk about what brings them here initially. So we do the psychotherapeutic assessment, academics, whatever the issues is, depression, anxiety. We get into that kind of stuff. And I remember with this one student, like I said, obviously Muslim from his name, he knew I was, back and forth. We didn't get into the discussion of religion. He thought, I could tell by his face, maybe I'm assuming, but I've seen that many times. The assumption is they thought I was going to judge them when they tell me, and he says that later on when we looked at finding solutions for what he came in. But then he started saying things about, I haven't been praying. I haven't been reading Quran. And I believe it was during Shahr Ramadan. But I pulled away from that. And so I almost felt like he expected me to say, oh, that's not good, or oh my God, you're going to go to hell.
Sorry. This is on his own sister? I mean, you didn't probe him about.
I didn't say anything about religion. He
Interesting.
brought it up when he felt safe that we discussed the issue at hand that he was struggling with. He felt safe, supported. He brought up Islam. He brought up.
He knows, right? He knows that's the missing link.
Yeah, he brought it up. And then
Incredible.
because it wasn't judgment, and I find that's where the problem is in our communities for the most part,
Yes.
the judgment of, oh, that's wrong, you're going to hell, you're not praying.
Yes.
I put it back on him and I said, so what can you do about that?
Right.
What can you? And this is in my research I found when we're looking at Islamic counseling practices, is that it truly is the ownership of the client to take on what they want to do. And it is that whole submission to Allah in the end. But the submission to Allah in the end is all the strategies and the therapy to get there. So this person's a prime example of that. How can religion be harmful for this person initially is if there was this kind of negative push back to him. Well, you should pray when you're feeling depressed. That is not going to work. Why? Somebody who has a broken arm or leg, are they going to first turn to you, Sayyidina, or go to the emergency room?
Right, exactly.
Right? If their diabetic insulin levels drop or glucose levels drop, are they going to turn to religion right away to help with that? No, they're going to go to the medicine. They're going to get that insulin shot, regulate their glucose levels. So when we look at it from the psychomedical model, then the spirituality can come in after, because first we attend to the broken bone, give them morphine for the pain, manage all that.
Sure.
And then we work that way. Then we can get to the next part. So this person came in with a problem, even though I sensed it was spirituality. We didn't jump to that right away, because had we gone that route right away,
you would have lost him.
I sent him. This is where we can say that spirituality and religion, and I played devil's advocate with this student when he said, I'm not praying. I said, don't pray. I said, don't pray then.
Yeah.
He looked at me shocked.
You're
And
shocked.
so I
Yeah. Yeah.
deliberately said that. I'm like, don't
Yeah.
pray until you really feel you can do it.
Right. Right.
Then he's
Right.
like, but no, I can't. I have to pray. He hasn't been praying. And so I kept up deliberately with that, the reverse psychology. And he came back saying, when I said, well, what are you going to do about it? How do you feel that we can work with this? And of course, when we say we, that's holding hands, being supportive,
Right.
non-judgmental,
Right.
compassionate. And so
Right.
how can we, what can we do? How can we make this part of your treatment plan,
Yeah.
your therapy plan?
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to start praying more often by setting my
Beautiful.
alarm.
Beautiful.
I'm going to start doing that. And I said, you
Beautiful.
know what? And I learned this from Sheikh Jafar recently, but I kind of was doing it before, but didn't have a title for it. Faith it till you make it.
Yeah.
I love that line. I'm like, pray. And we've been told by respected scholars such as yourself,
Faith
pray
it,
it
like
even if
faith
you don't
it.
feel like it. Yeah. Faith it. Fake it till you make it. Faith it till you make it.
Faith it till you make it.
Yes. Isn't that brilliant by Sheikh Jafar?
That's something Sheikh Jafri would do, yeah, for sure. Can I chime in here? It's a very good discussion. I think that the other problem is, and you're right, I don't think we're quite there yet, where people who are going through anxiety and depression, their first thought is, I need more spirituality. I think a lot of it has to do with the sheer idea that we just haven't presented the deen to be like that. So I think there is an immense amount of spiritual guilt in our communities.
Yes.
I think that beyond the idea that I am losing control of my life right now, things are spiraling. On top of that, I'm a horrible servant of God.
Yes.
So naturally, you're not going to go to the four walls that reminds you that while everyone else is praying, you're not praying. Which means that, people like myself from this side of the equation, right, on the pulpit, or people like yourself who also speak and you address communities, we have to ensure that we present the deen the way it should have been presented, not to be an all or nothing, black or white binary system where, look, either you are going to heaven or you're going to burn in hell, or if you miss one salat, or if you have one strand of hair showing, you're going to be hung. And there's no way I'm condoning any of that behavior, but oh my God, I mean, the amount of fear in these guys that has been instilled, and fear has been. And I don't know how it is in the Arab and the Iranian culture, but in our Indo-Pak community, it's all about fear. Yes. I mean, scare them in believing in God, right? And so, why would they turn to a God that they're scared of, right? They know, or they think that God's mad at me. Why would I go? It's like avoiding your parent when you've messed up, right? I mean, so, sometimes it's like my focus right now when I see 15, 16-year-olds, I have to sometimes kind of destroy what they've been taught and help them rebuild it.
Have you heard of this joke, Syed, now, where this mother runs into the room and screams out, fire, fire, get up, get up. And the kids jump up. Where? In hell if you don't get up and pray.
Yeah. I mean, whatever works.
Instilling fear instead of creating.
And I understand. Look, sister, I get it. A lot of people, a lot of your viewers right now will sit there and say, what's wrong with that? We react quicker to fear than we do to love. No doubt about it. That can't be the only presentation. You have to have fear. Of course, we have hadith that tells us if you were to measure khawf and the raja inside the mu'min's heart, hope and fear, it will be equal weights. No doubt about that. Right. I think we've been a little bit imbalanced. I think that we have to get to a point, this is my dream, inshallah, that when you do have a chunk of bad days where you are in darkness, right? Then you pick up the seed of Nabi Yunus, right? La ilaha illa anta subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. That, like, there is no God but you, glory be to you. I'm the one that's placed myself in this situation, right? I'm now coming to you, of course, to rescue me. So, it's not all on them. It's not all on them to come, why aren't you praying salat? Why aren't you? Because we presented salat to be a check mark, to be a burden almost. It's not a solution, unfortunately. And it has to be. It has to be. Yeah.
It has to be. And I really believe creating that love and approachability. And like I saw with that student, when there was that compassion and support, when I saw him again, he told me straight up, he hasn't missed his salah. He's been engaging more with the Quran as a source of spiritual healing. And like I said earlier, once we tackle the practical hands-on issues, then it opens up for this to be as a part of that. And it is with that love and balance as opposed to that.
I'm in a very blessed position where I have young kids, right? I have, my eldest is 14 years old. You have your daughter as well, and we have a chance now to really kind of break that. And I don't mean to kind of, really hammer our parents. And I mean, they did what they thought was best as immigrant
Exactly.
parents. I'm not going to sit there and say they were wrong, wrong, wrong. But we really have a chance to kind of change the narrative and really sort of present, to my 6-year-old young guy, 6 years old, really present a God of love, that God really loves you, and we
Yeah.
can do that from now with the hopes that 10 years from now, their
Absolutely.
first stop will be God to kind of fix their issues. Yeah, inshallah.
Absolutely. A little parent psychological spiritual hack that I've learned over the years since
Mm,
very young with my daughter who's 11 now, mashallah. She's mukallafa, full hijab. She's getting every day of Ramadan this year, mashallah, Shahr
amazing,
Ramadan. She's really excited.
yeah.
I learned early on to create, which I learned from my mother, is that when we're on the prayer mat is a place of love and
Mm,
spirituality and just
mm,
coziness, lots of hugs and kisses. We wear the same chadar. We use
beautiful,
the same prayer mat. And it's just all these lovey-dovey feelings
beautiful.
that when you create, and this is where the psychology comes, is when you create a positive
Yeah,
memory
yeah.
with that feeling of an act, that stays within your
Yes,
child. It stays
yes,
within us,
yes,
right?
yes,
And
yeah,
we wire these beautiful
yeah,
memories in our children's
yeah,
mind that when they
yeah,
think about prayer, when they run into trouble, and we've
yeah,
taught them in a beautiful way,
mhm,
instead of,
yeah.
get up, you're gonna burn in hell if you
Exactly.
don't pray.
No, no, you're right.
That
My
attitude.
yeah, my 14-year-old is the same way. Like recently we went online. We went chadar shopping. Right, my wife and
Nice.
her and 14-year-old. I go, look, these are beautiful. Now they have I mean, these companies make beautiful scarves and for young women, everything, just gorgeous designs. And
Yes.
I said, look, go crazy, pick out whatever
Yes.
you want, add it to the cart. I'll handle the rest of it. And then I remember one time she had, I came downstairs and she fell asleep on the musalla. And she
Oh,
woke
that's
up saying, "Oh
beautiful.
my God, Baba, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." I said,
Oh,
"No, no, no. I'm really happy. That means that you saw this place as a comfortable. I mean, it sounds silly, but as a physically comfortable place for you
exactly.
to like. And that association talk about is very, very important.
That
We have to
association.
do the exact same thing with our masajid and our mosques as well. That's why
Absolutely.
I'm a big advocate of, if you have the space for it. I know that Edmonton doesn't, but if you have like a field outside something, have your recreation, have your fun,
Yes.
have your bonfires, have your marshmallows, have your
Yes.
majalis, your latmiya,
Yes.
all at the building. Let them
Absolutely.
associate fun with the center. It's not blasphemous, right?
Yes.
That way, when that way they want to go to the center, right? In the month
And
of
let the
Ramadan.
kids go wild. I think a lot of
Right,
it's
right.
let
Yeah.
them play, let them die.
Yes,
Sure,
let
give them,
them play.
we teach them the etiquette, of
Yeah,
course, when it's time they're
yeah,
speaking and you got to
yeah.
stay quiet. And that
After the program, let the
Yes,
brother run.
after the program. No, our programs there at the Arab centers, it's like from beginning to end. I like leave and I go to Toronto to JCC for
Yeah,
Muharram because
yeah.
it's so nice and quiet.
Yes,
And I
yes,
come
yeah,
back and brag about how they do.
yeah.
But
Yes,
absolutely, the association is crucial, and
yes, yes,
this is where we instill that very
yeah,
young in our children, and
yes.
even let's say, right now, like you talked about shame and guilt, and a lot of people
Mm,
perhaps are
mm,
feeling, especially Shahr Ramadan, when
mm.
women decide to wear the hijab during this time,
Yes,
or
yeah,
perhaps don't wear makeup, or
right, right.
people start coming to the masjid. There's a lot of
Yes,
shaming from people
yeah,
towards those people who
yeah,
are acting upon that. It's like,
yeah.
why don't you do it all year long? Why are you just
Right,
doing it now?
right,
What's
right.
your take on that?
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's I think that I'm realizing now, because I think that the generation that's maybe in their late 20s, early 30s, they're now starting to open up. When I do a little bit of PR in Toronto, right? So if I don't see a young guy for a couple of programs, a quick text, hey, I miss you. What's going on? If
Right.
if the regular customers don't come to the shop is
Check
going to
in on
close down, right? So
Yeah.
and they'll say, oh, Asad bhai, I was busy, blah blah blah. But then when I kind of I kind of break the walls down,
Yeah.
they'll talk about judgment and they'll
Right.
talk about comments. And
Huge.
mind
Yes.
you, when I talk to the adults, I'm a little bit in between of both generations, right? I'm not exactly a young guy
Same
anymore,
here.
no, nor am I on the chair in the back. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I mean, when I do kind of bring it up to the uncles, they'll say, look, oversensitive generation, melodramatic generation, right?
Oof.
Blah blah blah, right? Especially in the month of Ramadan, asking a female why you're not fasting is just not something
Yeah.
you don't do, right? I mean,
Right.
and it's like, so I
There's
think there
been a
is
lot of that now on social
yeah,
media.
there's
A
too
lot
much
of
of it.
discussion lately on
Too
that.
much of it, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
don't know. I oftentimes say you don't know with which hope and how difficult it was for that sister or brother to muster up the courage and the strength to make it to the center, knowing
Yeah.
full well that I'm going to take a couple of hits, blah, blah, blah. Oh, look who showed up after so many years. What happened to you? Blah, blah, blah. So you
Yeah.
never know. You never know, right? And so if that delicateness is there, be a little bit sensitive towards that, right?
Yeah,
Embrace them, bring them a cup of tea. Say, you know what, I miss you. Let's break some bread,
absolutely.
have a cup of tea, right? It goes a long way.
Yeah,
So there is. And the other thing I want to mention here, and I'm talking a malamin, I'm sorry. The other thing I want to mention here is that one thing that I'm hoping begins to break is a little bit of this shame culture. That
right.
when there are things happening inside their homes and they need help, either an alim or an alima like yourself or a professional, they're more worried about the image that they will portray as a parent or a mother or father who's
That's
lost
true.
control of their kids, as
Yeah.
opposed to getting help. I get phone calls from parents who
Yes.
call me at the very last moments.
Oh, that's the
Yeah,
toughest.
I know. It's at the edge of a cliff, and I begged them, Auntie, you should have called me 3 months ago. And
Yes.
and she would respond saying, I was worried that you would think I'm a bad mother,
Oh, bless
right?
them. Yeah.
And that breaks my heart. But that shame culture has to be removed. And what we can do from this side of the equation to maybe cut the judgment and cut the shame. We've become excessively people pleasers, right? And I get the
Absolutely.
fact you live with these people, blah blah blah. I get it. There's got to be a balance, right? So we're not quite there yet in that area. I know parents who have kids that are struggling. I'm waiting for them to come and approach us for help, and they won't. And unfortunately, we don't live in a culture and I wish we did, for me to go and knock on their door and say, look, I know you just went through a nasty divorce. You have to need help. I know you do. We're here.
Mhm.
We're not there. Not in 2022. It's like they'll slam the door in my face, mind your own business. Who are you to ask me? I have to
Yeah.
wait for them, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
I wish it was like Imam Ali would
I
describe the Prophet as a roaming physician. I wish that's how we
I
were, but we're not,
I think we
unfortunately.
can do that though, in a sense, within what we're doing, for example, right now in this program, and what a lot of centers
Sure.
now are doing
Yes.
actual
Yes.
programs on
Yes.
wellness and mental
Yeah.
health, right?
Yeah.
So we've skipped a lot of questions. We'll get back to it with this discussion, but these two questions I think are really relevant to our discussion right now in terms of would a mental illness be considered a punishment from God for a sin that person may have committed? What
So
are your thoughts
you,
on that?
yeah.
It's where the shame also comes in from the
Right.
person who's
Yeah.
dealing with
Yeah.
it, or
Exactly.
others, the judgment.
And the
Yeah.
first thought is, and I'm sure you see this more than I do, but the first thought is that why does God hate me or why is God doing this to
Yes.
me?
Yes.
It's just not how God's wired. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not how he's wired. He doesn't do that. Like he's not some evil up there rubbing his hands saying, you know what? I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna put them into so much anxiety, so much depression, suicidal thoughts
Absolutely.
because they missed their Hajj or they miss that's we have to have a better image of God. It goes back to how
Essentially.
we, on this side, from the pulpit, from these discussions, how we present God, right? So no. I mean, yes, I believe sometimes God is asking us to go through a little bit of temporary pain
Yes.
for a almost eternal gain, for lack of a better word, right?
Right.
When the Quran says وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْءًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ, it could be that something is difficult for you, but there's
Yes.
actually good in it. There's actually khair in it, right?
We use that
Or
line
you
all the time with my Muslim
yeah,
clients.
yeah. Or you
It's a good
despise
one.
it. Or you
Yes.
despise it, but it's actually very good for
Yes.
you. And
Yeah.
God, yes, I'm not being naive. He does ask us to go through a number of difficulties, but the overall picture is the ultimate gain has to sometimes go through difficulty. But as a punishment, where he's
No.
enjoying, God forbid, seeing a believer of his go through this, I I know a different God. Let's put it that way.
Asante.
I don't believe. Yes, I believe in a just God, of course, a God who has punished those before, but not the ones who are struggling now to really kind of tread His path. So I mean, it's tough for me to kind of swallow that pill that a person now I see a 16-year-old really struggling to keep her deen, her hijab on, her spirituality, and she's going through anxiety, and to
Mm.
sit there and say God's letting her go through that, or forcing her, or punishing her,
Right.
I can't do it.
It's
Yeah.
hard to believe that, and,
Yeah.
when we look at it from a therapeutic perspective, and I use it in a secular way, but I also use spirituality even with my
Mm.
non-Muslim clients because it's a way of life and it works, is
Yes.
this idea of reframing. So, you've got this problem that's coming your way here, the challenges, and if you take it on like that and say, it's a problem, it's a
Mm.
difficulty. Why me?
Mm.
Why me? The classic why me. So if
Right.
you take that and then we reframe it and make
Mm.
it an opportunity. I always
Exactly.
use that in when I go to different communities. Okay,
Mm.
problem's coming.
Mm.
Let's reframe it and push it
Right.
that way and
Right.
call it an opportunity for
Yeah.
growth, for
Mm.
development,
Wow.
setting boundaries,
Right.
opening up horizons,
Right.
learning
Right.
how to communicate. This problem is a challenge for you that you can
Right.
learn and grow with
Right.
so much, right?
Yeah.
And of course, when we look at it from this perspective,
Yeah.
it's a test. It's an
Yes.
absolute
Yes.
test. Life
Yes.
throws at us so much
Yeah.
difficult tests.
Yeah.
How do we choose to respond to it? And
Absolutely.
people think sometimes they
Absolutely.
don't have a choice.
No, it's a
When
choice.
you do, you have a
Oh
choice,
yeah.
especially when you have that
Oh yeah.
awareness, when it's
No
brought to
doubt.
your
No doubt.
attention.
It's all
You
mindset. It's all
yeah, you
mindset.
have that
And it's
mindset.
funny, the last conference we did at the Afghan Center, I had learned this from you. I think you had said a
Well,
sentence that said that, I either you can say I have to pray salat or I get to pray salat,
that's
right?
beautiful. I don't think it
And
was me, but that was
okay,
a really beautiful line. That's because I get the choice to do it. I mean, it's
right,
it's
right.
prescribed upon us to
Right,
do, like
right.
hijab, like
So,
fasting, etc.
and that's why, again, another factor, and I know we're going off tangents, and we said we
Okay.
would, but I know that that's why one of the most beautiful discussions that again we take for granted is gratitude, right? And
Yes.
gratitude and gratefulness, ala kulli halin, in every situation, where it's easy for me to be grateful that, oh God, why didn't you give me this, or thank you for giving me this, but also thank you for giving me a chance to kind of, or thank you for choosing me for this difficulty. That's a whole different ballgame.
Mhm.
And that requires a
Absolutely.
strong level of faith. Where as
Yeah.
opposed to me blaming God, I'm thanking God for the chance to get closer to Him. Right?
I mean, this reminds me of
Yeah.
the beautiful, and I'm paraphrasing here, of Imam Musa al-Kadhim.
Yes,
I
yes, yes.
just want to
Yeah.
worship you.
That's
And
it.
then
That's
what
it.
does Allah give him that
Absolutely. Yeah.
opportunity to
Yeah.
worship through jail? Or
Yeah.
Nabi Allah Yusuf, how
Yeah.
he was challenged and then he
Yeah.
got the chance to get closer to his
Absolutely.
Lord through
Yeah.
imprisonment. It's so beautiful. If you reframe those life
Yeah.
lessons from the Imams and the Prophets, by the way, if you look at Nasiha, they had these really great bookmarks they gave out a few years ago, and it's online as well now, where they took each of the Prophets'
I saw
challenges.
that. I saw that.
So beautiful. That's
Beautiful. Yeah.
reframe. That is
Yes.
reframing
Yeah.
a difficult
Yeah.
life
I
situation
agree.
as an opportunity.
I agree.
For
I
example,
agree.
the single mother of Sayyidah Maryam, salam Allah,
Yes,
right?
yes,
The
yes,
Prophet was an orphan. The challenges that
yes,
he grew up with, when
yes.
you put into perspective like that, I love those. And I had them in my office and I was giving them out or sharing them.
That's amazing.
Beautiful.
That's amazing. I'll tell
We
you what. One thing that we take for granted as Shias, especially, and I saw
yes,
that by Nasia, and it was very. I think they were animated, right? There was one on Prophet Yunus as well, and the whale.
yes,
Those were very nice.
yes, yes.
We have, sister, from when you look at the idea that we left, we have from the moment the Prophet of Allah left Mecca towards Medina to when our Imam went into Ghibat al-Sughra. Okay, that's
No.
250 years.
Mhm.
Okay, of 14 lives of individuals that consistently did one thing. They somehow were able to convert their hardship into the worship of Allah subhanahu wa
Allah,
ta'ala, right? The
Allah.
day of Ashura, Ma raitu illa jamila, Imam Ali saying Fusura bil Kaaba, Imam Qadim, a prime example, right? All these things. Somehow they were able to take the difficulties of this dunya and take that, like you said, as an opportunity. And we have it in front of us. It's just a matter of emulation, right? Emulation. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, all the
What we
tools are
can
there.
choose.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk, and perhaps maybe we can do a discussion during Muharram and Arba'een on this. One of my favorite discussions when I really explored that and researched that area in terms of, ma ra'aytu illa jamila, like that is a huge reframe
Absolutely.
of a tragedy that was
Absolutely.
pushed upon
Yeah,
her and
yeah.
her family as an example to, well, to save the religion, but the lessons that when we talk about it from a
I
psycho-spiritual
mean,
perspective,
there are people that wrote papers on that statement.
absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
we could have that talk about horror, but you have to be in town, right? You're never in town for those discussions.
When I was
You're
in
always in
town,
the air.
I was in town the week before, and I told the group, "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" I was there for 3 days, 4 days in Toronto for that long weekend, and they're like, "Oh, can you come Friday night?" I'm like, "I finish work at 4:30.
Yeah, it's a
Expect
lot.
me in Toronto at
Hard.
7:30.
Yeah.
Inshallah, inshallah, we'll set something up,
No, I'm
or
saying
maybe
the work you
even
do,
in
mashallah,
Edmonton."
in Iraq with the widows and everything. I mean, mashallah,
Yeah.
it's
I
incredible.
can't wait to go back again. It's been too long. I've
Yeah,
got
may
used
Allah,
to go
Allah
every few
accept your
months.
work. It's
Jami'an
incredible.
ya Rabb,
It's
inshallah.
incredible, incredible. Very
Bless
inspiring.
you. Thank you so much. And sitting with the widows, especially during Muharram and Arba'een and Fatimiyya, when you listen to their challenges, it puts
Mm.
perspective in your life.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you
oh,
said,
yeah.
to be grateful for what you have,
Yeah, we have
but
nothing. Yeah.
to be in that position of letting them look at themselves in a different
Mm.
way, because they look very
Mm.
poorly
Mm.
on themselves because of how society
Yes.
judges and
Yes.
pushes on them. the
Yeah.
image of who they are and what they are
Yeah.
in that society.
Yeah.
But then in our discussions, we had this incredible link of you are the wasila between us
Mm.
regular people and to Allah and Ahlul Bayt,
Wow.
salamu
Wow.
alayhim, because you give us the opportunity to do
Yes.
good when we are helping you. And I see that with communities, and especially, for example, God bless, for example, the Khoja community. I see that they take it so seriously, helping
They
the
do.
widows,
They do.
orphans, the organizations that they're set up there. People go on these charity trips, wellness, these
Mm.
medical
Mm.
trips to go down and support them. And I say, you are a wasila for us.
Yeah.
Look at where you are, your maqam. These women were weeping when they started looking at themselves in a
So
different
let
way.
me ask you a question. Let me kind of, if we can switch roles here for a second.
Okay.
You do work in the East. You obviously do work in the West. Is that world becoming smaller? I mean, do you find your
Well,
approach to be drastically different when you speak to the widows of the East? Let's say, when I say East, I mean Iraq, right? Obviously,
yeah.
and I'm assuming you deal with widows and other sisters here in the West as well. I mean, is that am I sort of idealistic to think that it's kind of merging together, or is it two separate approaches?
Let me answer this a different way, because I don't think the answer is relevant in the sense of the women that I've worked with here. They're
Okay.
mostly, let's say, divorcees, not really much widows.
Okay.
But
Okay.
the widows in Iraq were saying they combined themselves in the same category as widows and divorcees in terms of how
Divorces.
society treats them.
Yeah. Wow.
So if we look at it from that sense, much more harshly there, of course, but it's the same kind of idea with the divorced women, how they're looked upon as secondhand, something to be used, discarded, not respected or valued. It's as though it happened to her, like she did this to herself. So I found that to be interesting, similar, but harsher there in that climate and environment, because women here are a lot more independent and are able to be more independent, whereas there, the society is much more difficult than here. Now, to answer this question in a different way, which is very relevant to our discussion, is I've noticed each time I come back, especially when I don't know when I'm going next, I get this re-entry culture shock of depression when I come back here, first of all, because I feel like I'm in heaven there, as we all know.
It's empty. Yeah, there's nothing here. Yeah.
It feels, even though my family's here, my work, my daughter, my life, in that sense, I feel I'm living truly there.
Your
That's one
heart's
thing.
there, of course.
And it's what, and of course I'm Karbala'iya, my relatives and my mother's my grandfather's house across from Al Abbas is there. So it's a
Mashallah.
different
That's blood. Yeah.
connection, even more. Second, I find that when I come back here and treat people here, and I've said it to my bosses, they said, "What, you're not passionate about your work anymore?" I'm like, "No, it kind of sucks to be dealing with first world problems of people getting drunk and they're depressed when I'm dealing with this kind of trauma back in Iraq, for example, to put it bluntly." And another level, there are challenges here. They're very different from what they're experiencing
True.
there.
True.
That has shifted something in me in terms of my outlook. First, I've become rougher, and I've had to learn how to be more compassionate to people here, because I'm like, honestly, your problems compared to other people, I start judging within myself.
No, yeah, and that's
It
a trap
changes.
sometimes that we have to avoid, right? I mean, everyone has their own sort of respective issues. I mean, you want to shake people sometimes because you have no idea what you have. No doubt about that.
Exactly.
I think though, I'm assuming, and this is just my ignorance, that you have to deal with self-image issues in places like Karbala and Najaf, right? I mean, I don't know how it is again in the Arab culture, but in the old school Indo-Pak culture, if you are divorced or a widow at a very young age, you don't get remarried. I mean, that's just kind of you're
It's done
known.
for life.
Yeah, it's not right. I mean, that's it. I mean, you're this is you now for the rest of your life, right? And then you're told that okay, you're damaged goods and all these things that are disgusting words that people use. That's got to have an impact on your self-image, right? I mean, so how do you combat that? I mean,
I've seen with a lot of these women who are in these situations, mashallah, they're a lot stronger than we think, first of all. And when I have a group of widows in front of me, for example, and you have a young, beautiful widow, and she talks about how she's hit on and disrespected and all of this, and she can't wear colors, it has to be black. And we had this discussion how it affects your spirituality, yourself, and religion as well. Even there in Iraq, especially, by the way, it's supposed to be a religious, spiritual society. I've seen some stuff there that it challenges stuff here, and we know that it's sure on the outside it's like that, but it's how people live underneath. But for example, one young woman will empower another woman, or an older woman will empower another one and say, why are you living your life for others when you're here to please Allah, not your uncle, not this person, not that in society? If a woman wears her abaya and walks out to go get food for her child, she's like, libsat al abaya, she put on the abaya. Look at the disgusting implications for these women. At the same time, when you provide them with a supportive circle where one can give examples, and I actually did an example, and it's related to what we're talking of, how lifting our self-esteem and image, like you were saying, you have, I line them up like 10 women here, 10 women here, and I go at it. You insult her and you're going to reframe. We do the reframe strategy, and you talk back.
How like, are you do that actually, like physically, like role reversal sort of thing?
Absolutely. This one will say, you wore your abaya, you left the house. She's like, who's going to feed my kids? You and your husband? Like, I'll get them to battle each other. And they lift each other's sense of self-esteem. It's done through humor, but it's that reframe. It's so powerful. So this answers your question in terms of how these women, and some of them are very young, how they're challenged like that, how it affects their sense of self, right? We're totally off topic here in terms of our guideline here, but that's okay. It's all related, because these women will use, and at the first thing I hear from them, subhanAllah, which is inspirational for us when we talk about wellness and spirituality, they say alhamdulillah for their circumstances, gratitude right there, and awareness. Second,
that's amazing.
They say, if it wasn't for Allah and the Ahlul Bayt, salam Allah alayhum, we wouldn't have been surviving this far. If it wasn't for the barakah of faithful people who look out for us, and organizations, and just the caring, loving people who want to take care of these people, we wouldn't be here. And so we took it a step further when we looked at wellness and religion here, in terms of, well, if you don't take care of this aspect of yourself, how are you truly going to be there for your child moving forward, et cetera, right? So alhamdulillah, I'm planning, yes, I am coming in June, inshallah. I'm heading back down there again in the boiling, sizzling weather, but that's okay. And we're going to be continuing these projects to helping these women realize their full potential in a very difficult environment, which teaches us so much here. Right?
So, may Allah accept your efforts. It really is incredible.
And all the people who are supporting, the donators.
Yeah, you have a nice team down there. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah,
they're wonderful. These people have been for years supporting the widows from, let's say, their practical needs, right? And this, if we connect it to what we're talking about, when our basic needs are met, food, shelter, all of this, right? Then we can move on to the next level. Right. Because in this part of the world, our basic needs, alhamdulillah, for most people are met. Even if we have financial challenges, there's a community here, there's a government here that for the most part is helpful. A lot of these people don't have that kind of support. So how do you move on to the next part of your, I don't know if you've heard of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy.
Yes.
Relevant here, where your basic needs are met, shelter, food, et cetera, safety, right? Then you can go on to the next levels, which have to do with that human potential. And this is where our wellness comes in. And this is where, from our Islamic spiritual perspective, your needs are met here. And then you ask the questions, why am I depressed or anxious? I have everything I need. Why do I still feel
and that's why, when people do call me, talking about their mental health issues, the first thing I remind them of is that even you having this conversation with me about your mental state, it comes from a place of privilege.
Alhamdulillah, exactly.
I mean, you don't think that people in Iraq or in India's villages, they don't have their stress and anxiety? They do, but they can't stop and look after their mental health because they have to worry about their next meal sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
So you're right. I mean, even again, we go back to the deen because that's what the theme of this program is. The peak of Maslow's triangle is self-actualization, right? So when you do self-actualize, and that of course is the goal inside the deen as well, that you become a reflection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That comes first, that when you're right, when the food, shelter is taken care of, I can climb up that triangle and get to a point now where I'm looking after my mind, because everything, of course, and I realize that people can truly, I've seen people, so have you, more so than I have, they're incredible at creating anxiety when there is nothing there. Right? It's like, it's like there are some people that are looking for contentment and others who really find contentment in chaos. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and
That's a
I'm
personality disorders,
yeah,
by the
I'm
way.
wowed by them. I'm like, dude, there's nothing here to create, and you did a whole sandstorm, like everything. And there are some people that I think that they're looking for something, but they don't realize it. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that you know if you are someone out there listening to us right now who is trying to work at their mental state and trying to strengthen their anxiety and stress, then I do think that understand that you are actually elevating, that you've been blessed to even have this conversation. It's
Yes.
very easy, it goes back to mindset, very easy to sit there and say, why me, why me, why me? But you've surpassed a basic level of your hierarchy, and now you're moving towards ultimately the peak being self-actualization, right? Where now you're able now to be that control of your mind, your body, and your soul. And that's where we're kind of after. That's why Islam says there's no retirement age, right? You keep going,
Yeah.
keep moving, right?
Exactly.
Like I mean, there is this one quick little story, and then we'll move on. This, individual by the name of Unwan al-Basri, from the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. And very famously, he now has a hadith called Hadith Unwan al-Basri. Right, the ulama have done commentary, books have been printed. Right, this was a man who was begging Imam Sadiq to become his teacher. He had a teacher in Malik, and Imam Sadiq every single time, in the first few times, would say no to him. Would say, look, you have a teacher, go with him, stick with him. I'm busy, I don't have time to take on a new student. This man showed up at the door of Imam Sadiq, sat on the ground and waited for him to come outside and greet him. On the ground. He was 94 years old. Right?
Allah.
And you think about a 94-year-old man. I'm trying to think how many 94-year-old men I know sitting on the ground, waiting on the dusty ground, waiting for Imam to come and teach me everything you know. There's no retirement age when it comes to the deen. We're always trying to reach that peak of Maslow's triangle. And again,
Absolutely.
great triangle, but that was already there in the deen, 1400 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
You have to move to the point where you are, like I said, nafsin mutma'inna, right?
Santum.
Where you are radi with Allah and Allah is radi with you, inshallah.
Inshallah, we can always head towards in that direction. And when we look at spirituality or progress and growth in anything, people have this really difficult image of it being linear like this.
Yes.
And I always like to describe it, and I learned this, I forget which sheikh, I always like to reference where I get my content from. But they said, well, it's like this. The spirituality is up and down. Oh, Sheikh Tajiri, I remember from London. I remember he came to Ottawa years ago, and somebody asked that question, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's great. I'm going to use that in my therapy. And it's like this. Your spirituality goes up and down as you go up. Just like I described with the clients, the first time you head into a problem, you dip, and then you kind of go up, and then when you go down again, you're higher than when you first started because of the skills, the strategies that you've learned. So then you can deal with the situation better, even if it's a different situation. You've toughened up, let's say, you've learned how to cope and deal. Now you've got experience and also perhaps to share with others. So with this idea, how can we improve our spiritual health, especially during these holy nights of Ramadan, with everything we've discussed, the shaming, the imposter, the guilt and judgment? How can we work on that?
So this is a whole much list, but a couple of quick points. Quick points. I promise, quick. Number one is that we have to stop following the sida of shaitan. The first problem shaitan did was he compared himself to somebody else. Right? Ana khayru minhu. I'm better than he is. Right? And that's why I didn't do sajda. And before anyone jumps on me, I understand the idea that looking at somebody who has a little bit more piety, a little bit more put together, a little bit more in control, we have this what's called ghibta, this positive jealousy, for lack of a better word. We have that in our deen, no doubt about it. But we sometimes self-sabotage ourselves because we think that we should be like person A, B, and C.
Absolutely.
Right? When in reality, the comparison is within yourself, right? And that's why God says you have your own path. Like kullu shay'in tariq. Everything has its own tariq, its own path. Where you came from, what your capacity of, what your dharfiyah is, everything is based on you. The first thing I would tell myself and anyone else listening is compare yourself to yourself. If you're somebody, for example, who would struggle reading the Quran and every day you're able to squeeze out 5 verses, that's victory.
Absolutely.
That's success.
Yes.
And the one thing that I was never taught when I was younger that I'm now learning through my research is the Ahlul Bayt would teach us it's okay to sit there and say Alhamdulillah when you've accomplished something. That's not riyah, right? Riya is
Mhm.
when I think I am somebody. No, if, for example, I'm faced with a sin and I didn't sin, it's okay to stop, whisper to myself, alhamdulillah, feel a little bit good about myself, take the victory, take the success, and move on, right? So I think that we have to understand that the deen is very, very methodical. It's slow, tiny baby steps.
Yes.
Okay, we live in a go big or go home era, and that's not how the deen is. The deen does not believe in skipping steps or leaps and bounds. Yes, there are moments, the nights of Qadr, the night of Ashura, where we want more, and that's fine. But when Imam Ali says, look, when your nawafil prayers, in Najib al-Agha, your mustahab prayers, the recommended prayers, when they interfere with your wajibat, then you
Mm.
leave the mustahab prayers.
Right.
Just do your fara'id, do what's wajib on you. There'll come a moment where your heart wants more, give it more. When it wants the bare minimum, give it the bare minimum, right? That's the fluctuation we talk about, right?
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes it's the idea that we're not fair on ourselves,
Yes.
right? And it's
Very
all or
true.
nothing. And the deen is a lot, but the deen is not all or nothing,
You
right?
create more anxiety upon yourself when you
Absolutely,
feel you have
absolutely.
to finish the whole Quran, you have to do the a'mal every
No,
day.
no,
And I've
no,
learned that over the years to ease
no.
up in the sense
Yeah,
of, you do what you can. There's these great journals out says, you can do this a'mal today, this. They're
yeah,
beautiful to help you get organized.
right.
However, it can also cause a lot of stress for people say,
Yeah,
oh, I
no,
didn't do
I
this
mean, push
today or
yourself.
that.
I'm not saying don't push yourself,
Yes,
absolutely,
yes,
but
yes,
to sit there and like equate your self-worth to the
yes.
fact that you weren't able to get through one juz today, that's
Oh,
heavy. That's a lot on you.
yeah, yeah,
You're working, you're a mother, you're looking after the home, you're going to the center, you're going to the mosque, you're sleep deprived.
yes.
Just give yourself a break. Go know that God's giving you that break.
Yeah,
Anyways, I
yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
And even students, for example, and I
Yes.
learned this
Yes.
as a
Yeah.
student that your focus and
Yeah.
juhud, struggle in your studies is a form of worship.
Absolutely.
Go study, you don't
Yeah.
feel you're missing out if you can't go to the masjid or Ayam
Yeah.
Muharram. I remember I was dying wanting to go, and my mom's like, hey, you've got an exam to study for.
Right.
That
Right.
you get thawab for. And just
Yeah.
reframing that thought
Yes.
really lifted up that anxiety and stress of missing out.
Yeah, and just to add to your story, what your mom said, the second or third year in the house in Qom, I remember before I went out for tabligh, we were there for the month of Ramadan, and I remember my ustad had set his final exam date to be the 23rd day of the month of Ramadan. And we're like, Ustad,
Even in
come on, man.
Islamic
The
colleges,
night
wow.
the night before we're up all night doing Amal. Can you at least make it 24th? And he said something that I always mention on the minbar. He said, your Amal that night is to study.
Allah. That's so
You
powerful.
do
Such
the
an amazing
Quran Amal for 15 minutes, but your Amal is what is required of you. What is your wazifa, your taklif, your
That's right.
responsibility, right?
Yeah.
If you
That's
fulfill
so
that,
powerful.
that's your ibadat. Yeah, yeah.
That's so powerful. So we've got a little bit of time left, and I think I will
Mhm.
need to address this question because a lot
Sure.
of people will bring this up. So now we're changing gears because we're totally singing to the choir with what we're talking about. This is a little bit interesting how, some religious groups have the beliefs that someone with a mental illness or condition is actually possessed by demons or spirit, or kitab is written on them, or evil eye, right? So what is the Islamic perspective on this from your area of knowledge?
Yeah, I mean,
That's a big one. I see it all the
yeah,
time.
it's a big discussion and one that I don't know how much again inside of our subcontinent culture in the Pak, it seems like any moment of difficulty, right away they go to jinns or they go to
Yes.
somebody has done nazar on us. They go
Yes.
through this and that, so they want a quick fix. They want a dhikr, a dua, this and that. And
Yes.
while I'm not denying the science, I think that we have to stop and understand that you know number one, there's a cause and effect theory that we cannot deny, that sometimes we kind of write our own story.
Yes.
Why people like me sometimes are surprised at where I'm at when I've done nothing to prevent it. Number
Yes.
one. Number two is the fact that sometimes we have to look at the ahadith that says that sometimes a fitna, a difficulty, a test for a believer is sometimes darajat. It's actually a chance for you to go up levels in the eyes of Allah
Mhm.
subhanahu wa ta'ala. So
Mhm.
yes, you might have a quick fix or write me a dua, attach it to my arm or put it somewhere at the door, blah blah blah, blow this 3 times. And I'm not. This is not a discussion on that, but I think that sometimes for us to assume that any instance of difficulty are the demons. Number one is that we are denying the actual, like I said, law of causality. And number two, more importantly, we are denying ourselves a chance to grow.
Yes.
Okay, I've lived life long enough. You've gone through, I'm sure, your issues. So has anybody else. You look back to what I went through when I was 15, 16, 17. I thought this was the end all and be all. It's going to ruin me. That's it. I'm done. And I laugh at those things. In fact, I might even attribute those things to how I'm able to handle things now. But
Absolutely.
during that moment, I think this is it. I'm done. I can't handle it. This is going to be the end of me. But it's just a matter of me growing, like you said, growing through that moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Reminds me of the time a few years ago before mental health became a trend in our community as well. We had a sheikh at a local mosque where a family had taken their son who was having a psychotic breakdown, thinking he was possessed by a jinn. They took him to him. He took one look at him. He's like, take him to the emergency. Why are you bringing him to me? Even though he's very well known to help with spiritual healing. He said, no, take him to the hospital. Why do you bring him to me? And he was angry with the family. And I found that anger to be interesting and justified in the sense that people right away go to our scholars and alimas, which is wonderful that you feel safe to go to them for problems, as you see, right? But then they are not the ones who, let's say, can help if it is a mental health issue,
No,
right?
no, no.
Yeah.
I mean, there are cases that come to me, sister, that have really gotten to the point where this is way out of my scope. And
Yes.
right away, I say, look, I can lend you an ear for half an hour, but this
Yes.
is where you got to go. You need professional help really badly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like if we're talking about hurting yourself and scars and knives,
Yeah.
and at that
Yeah.
moment, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers. At that moment, you got to
Special
go to the
training
hospital.
for it.
Right,
There's
right,
yeah,
right,
there's
right,
special
right.
training for it. Even some of us counselors don't have that specific
Yes,
training in this
yes,
area,
yes.
but
Yeah.
generally now we all do because it's so unfortunately common, right?
Common, right, right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
I mean, you have
yeah,
the typical challenges when you have families, divorces, abuse, even then, but then, like you said, it gets to the point where what addictions problems, like you
yeah.
need an actual therapist to help with that,
Like
right?
my fear is that in my attempt to help, I might even add to the problem, right? So I have to
Exactly.
put my ego aside and say, look, I can't help you with this,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And
I
this
I
is
I
not,
honestly do that, Sheikhna, myself. Sometimes there are things outside of what I've trained to do in my
yeah, yeah,
experience, and we do that. This is a psychiatric issue, not
yeah,
a psychotherapist, so we have to refer on.
yeah,
Absolutely, but I find it amazing, alhamdulillah, now in our centers worldwide, most of the centers have this open attitude now where openness where people can go and I call all of you guys, let's say the frontline workers, because
yeah,
they come to you and then
yeah,
alhamdulillah, like I said, working with a lot of Sayyids and Sheikhs
yes,
and Alimas over the years, there's this
yes,
openness now where we refer to each other and not something we can't handle, we still want to do it. No, we
right,
refer to the appropriate
right,
supports and there's this
right,
network. I mean, again, if you look at the Jafri Center, they have
yeah,
beautiful systems set up where they
yes,
actually have a counseling service in
yes,
the
yes,
center, right?
yes, yes,
Which
yes,
leads to
yes,
what we know, who can I talk to about my
right,
mental illness in a
right.
mosque setting? Who can I talk to?
Yeah.
What are your
So
thoughts on that?
one area in that, and I know we're pressed for time, but where we're still not quite there yet is the trust factor.
Uh-huh. I was gonna ask that. Can I trust our leaders? Can we trust the
Yeah,
leaders to maintain
you should be
privacy?
able to. You should be able
Good.
to.
Should
Obviously,
is the key word.
shut on. Someone comes to you with an amanat like their personal information. You got to keep that to yourself, right? Now that's idealistic, but unfortunately, you've heard stories. I've heard stories where somehow now it gets out to the whole community, and that has an immense
Yes,
impact on
yep,
the idea that, look, this is why I don't go to you guys. He knows
absolutely.
my brother, he knows my aunt, he knows my mom. He's gonna say something, blah blah blah, this and that. And we have to, on this side again, we have to now create that safe zone where, look, what you say. And it's funny how you mentioned that. Almost every conversation I have to verbally tell them, because they'll ask me, this is between us, right? I go, yes, it absolutely, I am bound by the
Oh, the
Sharia.
secrets we hold, Sheikhna.
Sorry.
Oh, the secrets we hold.
I know. It's a vault, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why this is so white so quickly. I mean, it's just it affects me. It affects me. Like after a call, I can, my wife can see my face just drained
Yes,
afterwards. I'm
it
just like,
is. Yeah.
my heart hurts. I mean, this is so many people who are hurting right now,
Yes.
and it's just
Yeah.
like you almost feel guilty for having a sound home or great kids or
Where
health and
gratitude
whatever.
comes in,
Yeah.
gratitude and perspective.
Yes, exactly,
And it's
exactly.
really important to address this even to families who are looking to seek counseling support, is that we are held as therapists, we are held by law with
Yes.
confidentiality, that we could get what's the word I'm looking for? Not punished.
You can lose your license, right? I mean,
You can
yeah,
absolutely lose your
yeah.
license. There I forget the technical word, but in any case, there's punishment, consequences for that as well. Discipline, that's the word, discipline for that.
Yes.
So we
Yeah.
take it seriously. But I hear this often, that they want counseling only with me or just person or that, because they cannot trust the person in their own
Right.
community.
Right.
Therapists even in their own community. So
Yes. Yes.
imagine when it's our frontline workers, the chefs,
Yeah.
the alimas, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there definitely needs to be more
Right.
accountability, I would say,
Yes,
especially
no, that's a great, it's a great
yeah,
word you use, and I agree. And the entire onus of that is on us,
yeah,
as you would
yeah.
say very, very, very nicely by
We
the
have a
frontline workers.
regulatory system that we
No,
follow. The sheikhs do not. I've actually
no,
brought this up with the Marja'iyya in Iraq
yeah, yeah,
when I've seen problems in our communities here
yeah.
because some scholars, sheikhs, or whomever in positions of power are rogue. They're not
Mm,
following what they're doing in terms of actually
mm,
being there and servicing and helping
mm,
people. They're
mm.
actually hurting people.
They are, they are. I
And I
agree.
said, there's no regulatory system that you have in
I
place
agree.
for monitoring
I
people.
agree.
Every year we have to
Yeah,
go through a system and making sure we followed up. We've done our
yeah,
professional
yeah,
credentials, et cetera, et cetera. We're
yeah,
reviewed before we get our yearly license to be scholars and so on and so forth, life coaches, people like that. They don't. So you have to be really careful who you go to. Although our sheikhs and alims and scholars have, like you said, that image of trust and confidentiality, it's really important to know
yeah. The
that we
other
take
thing,
that seriously. That's
yeah,
important.
and you're right, and you're right, and the other problem I find is that sometimes there's a cultural barrier, right? So,
Yes.
an island from back home, as opposed to, let's say, one, who's maybe kind of born and raised in the West a little bit.
Like yourself.
Yeah, it's a
Exactly.
little bit of a different approach. Like, for example,
Yes.
if a physically abused wife comes to, let's say, an alim, he might say, just based on his culture,
Be
oh,
patient.
yeah,
Be
be
patient.
patient. Men are angry. That's how they are.
Change
It's
this,
okay.
change this. Yeah.
Right. He
Make them
doesn't
love
he doesn't
you.
mean well. Whereas I would say, look, sister, you are not to tolerate that. I mean, there's never a
Ahsantum.
moment where a man can raise his hands to a woman, right?
Ahsantum.
And
Ahsantum.
she was like, that's not what I've been hearing. Like, I feel guilty
Allah.
now, and so, they'll hide the bruises, and they'll
Yes.
still defend their husband and blah blah blah. And I mean, it's so, I mean,
Heartbreaking.
that's still a work in progress.
It
And
is. It is.
and I wish there was a better system, but unfortunately it is sometimes, at the discretion of the alim, what he or she may think is better for that client. And again, it goes to the idea that you have to stay in your lane. If this is a little bit outside of your expertise, you have to say, look, this is not me. I'll give you this
Ahsantum.
number. I'll give you that person. Go
Yeah.
talk to that person. Yeah.
Ahsantum. Which
Yeah.
leads me to this question. Do you think our communities and spiritual leaders are doing enough to address mental health issues? It's a tough
Not
one.
yet. Not yet.
We're getting there.
We're
Slowly.
getting there. We're getting
Yeah.
there slowly. Not yet. Just based on conversations.
Yes.
And as much as I would assume that guys, my generation, a little bit younger, were on board with everything automatically because they're from the West, I
Yeah.
realize that that's also not happening. There are people
Mm-hmm.
who think that people like me coddle our young generation,
Uh-huh.
or yeah, oh yeah, or give them the tools now to be melodramatic, or don't pump them with a little bit of forbearance, that a little bit of issues 3 months into the marriage, they shouldn't be walking away. And I remind them that, look, you know what? She's getting bruised every single night in that
Allah.
marriage.
Oof, oof,
What
oof,
do
oof.
you want me to tell her? Say, just write it out for 6 more months, inshallah he'll change? I can't do that, right?
No.
And
No.
so, as much as I love the progress being made, and there are some groups like Nasiha, like yourself, like Sister Sukaina, others who are doing immense work, it's not where I would like it to be.
And I don't like to compare, but I have to in this case. If we look at our Sunni brothers and sisters, mashallah, they're
Yeah.
way far ahead when it comes
Yes,
to
they are.
mental health
I
in the
agree.
community and
I
wellness
agree.
services.
I agree.
We're getting there. We're getting there. I have
I
to put
agree.
another plug in here for a group here in Ottawa, started by a sheikh and other professionals in different fields, put together this group called Sakina Wellness Services,
Oh,
where we're
nice.
slowly putting it out there. And yes, it is a Shia-based group, but it's for everybody, where we
Mm,
are looking at getting where people can contact and refer,
mm,
where we can refer to mental health professionals, where
mm,
inshallah, where we can provide that support service as well, which is
mm.
amazing. We've got Nasiha. They actually have a physical location. And this is
Yeah.
a combined effort, by the way, both Shia and Sunnis working
Yes.
together.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you have a free therapist,
Yes.
Muslim therapist. How
That's
amazing is
amazing.
that?
That's amazing.
And alhamdulillah, like you said, although we are still behind, we're definitely ahead now than we were 5 years ago.
Absolutely. Oh
Before that,
yes. I
it's
remember I tried to
exciting.
do a mental health seminar at Al Mahdi 10 years ago, and I got roasted by our elders.
Oh dear. Oh
Yeah,
dear.
I mean, they thought that mental meant that, like you belong in a mental institution, right? With the straight
Absolutely.
jacket. I'm like, this is, it's not a new science, but it is a new science for a lot of people, right? So,
Yes.
we're a lot better than we are 10 years back. At the same
Alhamdulillah.
time, there is a lot more that needs to be done. If nothing else, if you can be a bridge for them to get proper help, then
Yes.
that sometimes is what they need, right?
You're
Yeah.
doing that. That linkage is so
Yeah,
important, you know?
that's it. I
Yeah.
agree.
And
I
we're
agree.
told that mental health professionals, they include, and I'm saying it here, we do include spirituality and religion in seeking treatment and support. Does it mean that one should seek a mental health professional that aligns with their faith? What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on
that's
that
a
as we
good
wrap up?
question. And I think to me, I've seen where they both work. They
Right.
both actually end up working. So I've been speaking to, for example, couples and families, individuals who, besides talking to me, let's say every 2 weeks, they also have, let's say, a non-Muslim counselor or
Yes.
psychiatrist once or
Yes.
twice a week, and they rave about the idea that they're able to balance it out.
Alhamdulillah.
Others have said that they've wasted my time. They have no idea what my culture, what my religion is, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and it's just
Yeah.
become an invoice after a while. So
Oh dear.
it's hard for me to commit to a yes or no in that question. I think it's case by case. You
Right.
definitely don't want to throw out the entire science and say, oh, anything secular or West is a waste of time. No, of course not. They've done
Yeah.
research. They've been around.
Yes.
They offer services that no one else does, especially in this part of the world. So
Yes.
I would say that if you are benefiting from it, and you need to kind of offset that with a little bit of spiritual advice, then those also are available to you as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that, by the way? I'd like to know.
Mixed, because I've
Yeah,
heard from
yeah,
some parents and people
yeah,
who've gone to, let's say, somebody who, not even forget Muslim, but not of faith, because even
yeah.
somebody of a different faith can have a good positive influence when they're
Right,
seeking that
right, right,
spirituality.
right,
It
right,
can
right.
really help. And
Yes.
sometimes, I've had some people come to me and say, I don't want to explain to my therapist that it's 4:30, but it's dark, and my dad expects me home because it's dark. I don't want to have to explain that. I want you to understand that, right?
That
So
makes
things
sense.
like that.
Yeah.
I've seen it work both, but I can also attest to the fact that in the last few years, there's been this exponential growth of therapists who are being more inclusive in every area, as we've seen, including this area of Muslims and faith in our communities. And I've had people of different faiths seek me out because they know I provide that kind of counseling
That's
and
amazing.
spirituality. And especially in light of the last few years where we've seen a lot of racism, the Black Lives Matter movements, and we're seeing the hate and Islamophobia here in Canada. You've seen a shift in a lot of places. I've seen that in my workplace as well, where they are deliberately seeking out professionals of different backgrounds and expertise to
Mm.
be there as a form of support. For example, all those years ago, 14 years ago, when I got hired, the person who left the position recommended to the boss, make sure it's a female Muslim hijabi who
Wow.
gets this position. I know
Wow.
God planned it for me, when I walked into this job, but I worked hard to get it. But you see, there's the idea of there's a lacking need for this. We need to supply that support because they, here at Carleton, they were trying to bring in a lot of international students. They were targeting a lot of Muslim countries at the time. And a lot of people were of that background. They wanted to make sure they had the support. So I see even more of this now, especially the last few years where we have positions in our clinic, racialized counselor, right?
Wow. Wow.
People will refer Muslim students to me and the other Muslims that I have now as peers and colleagues, whereas I was the only one for the longest time and a visible one at that.
But,
So
but for them
I
to
find
recognize that, I think is huge, right? I mean, for them to
absolutely.
actually say, like Carlton, to say that, you know what, a muhajjaba female, this and that. I think that's
They will choose
inspiring
me
for
to
me to hear.
represent.
Yeah.
They will
Yeah.
choose me to represent them in TV
Wow.
interviews in public. I love that
Wow.
stuff anyways, and promoting and talking about wellness and mental health.
Wow.
But my
Wow.
bosses will seek me out to send me to this training or that, or go to this class or that. And I find, and I love that. And it's not, a lot of workplaces will put people away and be discriminatory, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in this area, alhamdulillah, there has been huge movement in our
Yes. Yes.
communities. And
Yes.
inshallah, we can just hope for more. I love the students that reach out, that say, oh, can you give us advice on what to study? I want to do this. I've been following your work and the work you're doing with other people. It's amazing to see. It just makes me I just get so happy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
it's
inspiring
a
for sure.
testament.
For sure.
It's a testament that
For
alhamdulillah,
sure.
our community's moving
For sure.
forward. They're
Yeah.
understanding the link
Yeah.
between spirituality, religion,
Yeah.
with mental wellness and
Yeah.
psychology. And this brings us to the end, to the last few seconds, Sayyidina, that we were able to I think we covered everything and
I
more.
think so. I think
Alhamdulillah.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
God
Yeah.
bless you, Sayyidina. Thank you
No,
so
thank
much for
you.
your insights. I look forward to chatting with
Inshallah.
you with this topic, another
Yeah.
topic, and in person one day, inshallah. Maybe we'll be brought out to Edmonton and do a program there,
No,
inshallah.
inshallah. I want to give a shout out, of course, to the Jamaat in Edmonton, to Brother Zuhair, his team, for having the foresight to have such a program, for including you. I know you do work with them as well. I've
Yes,
also been out there in Alberta. I love that community. And
amazing people.
just a quick shout out and lots of du'as for putting on such programs that maybe this might instigate a little bit more other centers to do more as well, inshallah. This was
Inshallah.
incredible. I mean, I learned more than I think anyone else did. So thank you very much. And thank you for including me. May Allah bless you all, inshallah.
God bless you, Sayyidina. Please remember us in your du'as.
You as well. You as well. Thank you.
God
Thank
bless
you.
you for everything that you do for our community.
Ahsant.
A few years
Shukran.
back, my team and I here in Ottawa, when we were doing the Serenity Islamic Mental Health Awareness, we're like, okay, who's a really cool sheikh who talks about mental health that we can bring out? They're like, oh, the G sheikh down in the Syed Asad. That's what my team was telling me. God bless you for all that you do. You're the G gangster
Alhamdulillah.
sheikh,
I
apparently.
have no idea what that means, but I'll take it. Thank you very much.
In a positive way, of course.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Bless
Thank
you,
you very much.
Sayyidina, for all that you
Thank
do.
you. May
Thank you
Allah
so
bless
much
you.
for sharing your
Ahsant.
insights today with us. And inshallah, this can help people to come out and, trust, reach to the scholars, the mental health professionals that you
Yes.
do
Yes.
trust.
Yes.
And then if
Yeah.
we can't help you, we will refer you to
We'll
the
find
ones that
someone who
we
will. Yes.
trust.
Yeah. Ahsant.
Absolutely. The key
Ahsant.
thing is that please do reach out. Don't wait till 3 months later. As
No.
soon as there's an issue and you've tried your best and you can't, come reach out to all of us and we'll do our best to connect you if we can't help you ourselves. God
Inshallah.
bless you,
Inshallah.
all of you. Please remember us in your du'as, the Shahr Ramadan, especially Layali al-Qadr. Thank you so much, Sayyidina. And please
Thank
stay
you.
tuned for our next episode in about a month's time. And send in your ideas and comments if you like as well. And then we'll be more than happy to put out the content, the relevant content that you need for yourself, inshallah. Thank you so much, Sayyidina. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. We'd love to hear from you and have a blessed iftar tonight, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank
Assalamu
you.
alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahsant.